That's gonna be loud.
Boy, that destroyed everything. That gets marshmallow effect. Now there's a fire department right down close there.
Yeah, but they can't do anything. It's spread. That was that whole chip. That whole. I bet they got the marshmallow effect then.
Not that intense. Oh, there's another one.
Gives you a glimpse of what crews are now dealing with in the hardest hit areas. When our photojournalists started driving along Canaan Dune last weekend, they had to zigzag around down power lines. Other roads were impassable. They also found roads that were crumbling and cracked. And in Nakura Hills, charred guardrails where a one-lane bridge used to be.
The fire burnt all the way up to the roads.
But we have not been able to figure it out. We have seen a couple SoCal Edison trucks out here examining the power poles. Take a look at some of the video that we shot earlier. There was a power pole that was just completely sparking, crackling like a sparkler, like a firecracker. It's because there is still power running through these lines. And just a block down the street, closer on the other side of Mulholland Road, where Las Virgenes Road meets Mulholland Road, there was 3 power poles that were lit up in flames, and there were fire crews that just toppled onto that. They came over, put everything out, but we definitely saw a couple lines go down, and one of the neighbors that we spoke to, very concerned about this.
When we go off to war, when we exercise our rights, when we soar to our greatest heights, when our neighbors are at risk.
Yeah, I'm just getting some interference there. Should I send it back to you all in the studio?
Yeah, it's because I'm in a shitstorm.
When our nation is threatened, there's someone to gather the facts, to bring you the story, no matter the cost.
So typically, with journalism, what we do when we try to cover something as big as this, we try to whittle it down to personal narratives.
To warm your spirits here, I want to introduce you to 2-year-old Gracie, handing out breakfast burritos to fire crews.
Because knowing empowers us. Knowing helps us decide. Knowing keeps us free.
Only the second time in New York Times history that one article covers the entire magazine. The issue, climate change. Stay with us.
When our neighbors are at risk.
This is that new normal, that unpredictability, the large explosive growth fires.
Sadly, scenes like this are becoming the new normal worldwide as temperatures rise due to climate change.
This is now one of the most destructive wildfires in the history of the state, and firefighters say that's the new normal. And when you take a look at the destruction from our wider shot here, firefighters calling it basically their worst nightmare.
Yes, this is serious. Fires are now a more part of our ordinary experience. The predictions that things would get drier and hotter are occurring, and that will continue. We're in quite a cycle. But the predictions that I see, that the more serious predictions of warming and fires to occur later in the century, 2040 or 2050, they're now occurring in real time. And you can expect, unfortunately, that to keep intensifying.
So that the wildfires are hotter, more severe, and more dangerous for people living nearby.
The effects of climate change-induced environmental disasters on vulnerable populations
was due to human-induced climate change.
What does climate change mean when you see it through this lens when it comes to dealing with these massive crises, this term fire tornadoes that's now being used?
And the best metric they've come up with for this kind of event, an EF3 tornado on the Fujita scale.
Very, very impressive wind speeds.
With winds ranging from 136 to 165 miles per hour, some of the worst in California history, and peak temperatures of 2,700 degrees.
Whatever you call it, the firestorm that burned into Redding last week was not something we see very often, and even the experts are at a loss for words.
What we know is that, without a doubt, if you have hotter temperatures, it's just basic physics. You evaporate more water from your lakes and rivers.
It's hard, to go from your neighbor driving, his or her Hummer to work and concluding that because they did that, you're getting a fire. It's still a linked chain, like it's there.
This is a terrible thing about being an environmentalist.
And of course, billions and billions of dollars.
To do something about climate change is crazy economics. Literally crazy economics.
The wind especially, it's just so unpredictable. And when it creates its own weather, there's no predicting that, right? The other thing is the heat.
It was so unusual that even CAL FIRE investigators are still struggling to completely understand it.
These fires are much faster and stronger than we've ever seen before, and that's in part because of burning coal, oil, and gas.
You have so much heat that actually the bone fragments are exactly that. They're fragments. They're very small.
So yes, these more intense, larger fires are starting to become the new normal here in California. Fires are going later and are burning more intense later on in the year than they used to. They're all kind of becoming, I hate to use the fancy term, the new normal, but something's happening that's a little different.
Why was this fire so destructive and so deadly?
Keep in mind, we had a drought start way back in 2012. It honestly has not stopped. The embers that were cast by this fire were pushed well out ahead of this fire, and every ember landed and started a new fire.
That's what they're concerned at. Even though we don't see a whole lot of open flame, we see a lot of smoke in this area. In that smoke are those embers and those ashes, and they are spotting ahead of the fire. That's why this fire has moved so quickly through this area, miles. Definitely not a lot of big, heavy flames. The only big, heavy flames we're seeing is, back in Anaheim Hills, this is the 6900 block of Overlook Terrace. This is the same area we saw 2 or 3 very large homes burn earlier. You can see that the embers must have gotten in the attic of the attic of this large 2-story Spanish-style terracotta roofed home. And it looks like a complete loss. Firefighters are trying to douse it with the water cannons, trying to get some hand lines around it, but definitely penetrated in there. We see no active major fire around. In fact, we'll pull out to give you the wide look real quick, just to give you an idea of there's no wall of flame in here. There's no flame anywhere near here.
First of all, we have the sense that wildfire, high-intensity wildfire, like depicted in this particular picture, absolutely engulfs and explodes houses into flame, which then produces our perception that, my goodness, how in the world can this house still be here with all that flame in the picture?
Really, no open flames. You can just see how these winds picking up just that little bit of black brush there, maybe picking up an ember, getting into it. So this fire remains extremely dangerous. Even when there's not a lot of open flame, you can see right down through the middle of that house, a complete loss. A very large mansion here, 6900 block of Overlook Terrace in Anaheim Hills, fully involved with flame right now.
Why was this fire so destructive and so deadly?
The embers that were cast by this fire were pushed well out ahead of this fire, and every ember landed and started a new fire.
So imagine, just a wind-whipped fire, burning at explosive rates. This is 50-mile-an-hour winds pushing the flaming front.
Again, has no surrounding large flames. So we'll pull out real quick just to show you as wide as we can, even come out of the double Fermitat and get a real wide look of how isolated this home is, and look at just the barren landscape as we tilt up to the fire here in our overlook terrace burning. All it takes is just a little ember from that black patch off to the left just to get up into these eaves of these homes, into the attic space, and sit there and smolder for a couple hours, and this is what you get.
Many are returning to nothing as flames decimated the entire town.
The state's insurance commissioner says the losses are staggering.
Just before the campfire, the state legislature heard arguments over who should pay the billions in damages caused by downed power lines in the 2017 Napa-Sonoma fires. The state utility regulator, Governor Brown, and PG&E argued that because climate change has increased the risk and severity of wildfires, utilities should no longer be held strictly liable.
The severity of the danger is only heightened by climate change, with storms of increasing frequency that can topple poles and snap power lines.
The state utility regulator, Governor Brown, and PG&E argued that because climate change has increased the risk and severity of wildfires, utilities should no longer be held strictly liable.
We have the most expensive lawyers in the world that will argue it out in exquisite detail. So I'm not gonna add to it.
Handing out breakfast burritos to fire crews. She has 2 uncles and a grandfather helping to fight this fire. This community overwhelmingly thankful for what they've done. Amy?
Yeah, we needed to see that. Thank you so much, Kana.
Very clear, crystal clear about what is going on, what do we face, and how do we get out of it. So the easiest thing is to try to identify one source of our problems and then kind of pick on that.
Was due to human-induced climate change.
With the hidden heroes on the front lines of the raging climate-fueled wildfires.
It's sparks created by people, either because people are lighting fires actively or because human infrastructure is causing fires, such as downed power lines. And so when I say that global warming has increased the amount of fire, that is really promoted by the huge amount of sparks, the amount of ignitions that people are providing.
Was due to human-induced climate change.
And the truth is, and I don't want to be giving any happy time news, we're going to have more difficulties. Things are not going to get better. They're going to get more challenging because of the continuing alteration in the climate.
98% of all wildfires are caused by people, but it is still not clear what caused this one.
Very clear.
I'm Amy Goodman. As we go to California, where raging wildfires fueled by fires have killed